UK Motor Talk.
Well, hi everyone. We're back. We are UK Motor Talk, and I'm Mike.
And I'm Graham. Hello.
And I'm Dave. Hello. How are we all?
I think pretty good. We're back after the Easter break.
We're good.
This is nice. We've been given a few days off, so we've had what is probably the Mondayest Tuesday ever, I think. But what's new with you guys? What have you been up to?
Well, I spent far too much time on the roads over the weekend, supposedly as a bank holiday.
So you're
weekend.
responsible.
Well, I said to myself, nah, I'm not going to go out. I hate going out over the bank holiday weekends because the road is full of lunatics, even more so than usual. And all those lunatics that don't normally go out on the roads at all are there.
And there you are.
I ended up getting stuck with a fairly urgent collection from Gatwick. So I did manage to avoid the M25 though, which was I gather just about static most of the time that I was on the road. So I had some interesting back road driving to compensate. So it was great fun.
Definitely preferable to the M25 in my experience. I spent a fair bit of time driving or being driven over the weekend, but actually, yes, being driven.
Lord Dave, being driven.
Well, makes a change. Well, the thinking behind it was, as you may or may not be aware, I'm now back in the office 3 days a week, which
lucky you.
Yeah, lucky me, which involves driving, but it's infinitely preferable to the train, which it shouldn't be. It should be the other way around. I should be being encouraged to get on a train, but at £43 a day for the privilege of going in and out of London, I can't absorb that. And until they make that cheaper, I shall be sitting on the app 5 days and 1 minute before the booking time expires for the car parking spaces at work. And, this is the first time I've had to drive in and out of work regularly-ish since, well, basically 2 years ago. And it is noticeable that whilst the roads aren't exactly deserted, they are quieter. People are definitely working more from home or are taking advantage of the train tickets that are being offered to try and entice people back on the trains, which unfortunately don't work for me because I can't plan my days so easily. I'm probably cursing myself here. I'm probably going to hit the mother of all traffic jams next time I drive in. But to be fair, it's not as bad as it was. So, whilst I'd far rather still be working from home, if I have to go in and I am under my own steam and it's not so bad, then could be worse.
My benchmarks that, because I live in a village and a number of the local villages, commuter villages, every time I drive past any of the local stations, I just sort of eyeball the car parks. And whereas most of the local car parks would ordinarily pre-COVID be absolutely chock full, they're still only a third to a half full. So there's still a lot of people out there that aren't going up to town.
I'll tell you what I've noticed. That is that everyone used to drive around a lot quicker than they do at the moment. I don't know if they're saving fuel, but pretty much everyone is, except for electric car owners, I've noticed. There was a lady in front of me today, and she was an older lady. She sat there, and there was a car sat next to her, getting ready to go, a Volvo, but, a relatively sporty one, if such a thing exists. And she just pinned it and disappeared. Just absolutely disappeared in this little electric Mini. I thought it was hilarious. I mean, they are pretty quick, but of course, if you're in an electric car, you can just put your foot down. You don't have to worry about fuel prices and things, do you?
I can trump you there. If we're playing electric car top trumps, I experienced my very first Tesla Plaid today, a Model S, at a set of lights. I think you'll agree, if you've ever seen, say, a Model S with the twin motors take off from a set of traffic lights, the first time or couple of times you see it happen, it does completely reset your points of reference for what makes for a fast car, because this thing just disappears at a rate of knots with no noise, no drama, no wheel spin. It just digs down, and it was here and then it was there. The Plaid takes that and weaponizes it. This thing went away from me on a set of lights. I think it was going out on the A4, so it could very well have been a Tesla demonstrator or something. A lot of people around there do have Teslas around that part of West London. But this thing just completely vanished. It's like when people say they've seen a UFO and 1 minute it was here and the next minute it wasn't. It was just like that. And having been inside a Tesla Model S when it's done its business very, very fast away from standstill, I can tell you now, having your organs rearranged in just the cooking version was enough, but God only knows what it's like in the plaid.
They are quick.
They've been putting a few of them a few months ago, I think towards the end of last year, on drag strips in the States, and they've just been recording some extraordinary times.
Oh yeah, against some really serious looking stuff, and it kind of makes it look a bit silly to an extent, doesn't it? When you pitch up and you're in something that is very purposeful and traditionally, as we would think, quick, and then you and then just get blown away by electric hatchback, sedan, whatever it might be. I had a couple last week who bought a Mach-E from us, and the husband over the weekend this was on Thursday, sent me an email on Friday saying, yes, we need to have another one, please, because he wants one too, to get rid of he's had a diesel Merc. It's just entirely different. He just went from being open about the idea of electric bits and pieces to completely convinced and just decided he needed one himself.
Wow.
Which I guess is a glowing endorsement of the electric car, not necessarily the Mach-E as it is, but of electric cars in general. It's a completely different way of driving, very smooth when you want it to be, and relaxed and calm, or otherwise just ballistic. There's no doubt that it can improve certain cars. Just having that augmentation of electric is something that we're seeing now appear in motorsport. Of course, we've seen it in Formula One. We've seen it recently in the WRC as well. The hybrid Puma doing particularly well. And things have suddenly got a lot more complicated in the BTCC.
Yep. BTCC have gone hybrid. A complete change, as we've had with F1 this year, complete change of just about everything. Body shapes are generally still recognisable, but underneath it's all changed and they've gone hybrid. And I have to say I read the hybrid motor combination description today without fully understanding it, so perhaps somebody will be able to explain it to me in a minute. But essentially what seems to be the case is taking away the weight ballast penalties that have been the case for a number of seasons now, and replacing them with essentially I think it's a 60 volt battery.
Yep, 60 volt battery,
which can give a brief charge, and depending on how successful you've been in previous races, you get more of a boost or less of a boost, as I sort of understand it. And it doesn't last very long. So if you can imagine a sort of DRS type system, and not many people understood that when it was first out. So enlighten me as to the detail of how the two systems work, because, as I say, I read it and I didn't fully understand it, which worries me a little bit, because then is the audience going to fully understand it?
So it is a little bit complicated. So before you had success ballast, which they obviously mounted down low in the passenger footwell or wherever they wanted to try and balance everything out and have it in the most effective place. Now you get given a bit of a boost. So the hybrid system itself, it does use a 60 volt battery, which will have a bit of weight to it. It gives you up to 50 brake horsepower, which I think is a useful boost to your performance. And yeah, depending where you are in the rankings, you get more or less time being able to use it. So if you're at the front, it's basically nothing. And then as you get towards the back, it's 13.5 seconds if you're in 10th, and then everyone after 10th, they get 15 seconds of extra boost, which doesn't sound like a lot. But if you're using that coming out of a corner or something, then potentially it does give you enough to be able to get past a few people.
I think it's going to be beholden on ITV4, whose coverage is generally really good. They've been a long-time supporter of BTCC, and I enjoy very much their weekends. They're going to have their work cut out trying to explain some of this, and if they can, then obviously we're onto a good thing. And if anyone can do it, it'll be them. They do a good job. But it's like Graham said, and as you've described, Mike, it's a little bit complicated, and I think it's going to take a while for people to get their head around, as it will with anything new. We've got the new Formula One regs to get used to this year. Now we've got BTCC. God, will they not leave us alone just when you think you're getting a handle on things? But I think generally it's a great thing, and it's going to sort of mix things up, and looking forward to the season very much.
My only concern was how long it's going to take the public to fully understand that system. And I mean, we're now in season 8 or 9 of Formula E, And one of the things that's been notable with that from its earliest days is the fact they've had to simplify, because it was simply too complex to be fully understood. And it stopped being entertaining. Well, I think in its earliest days, it wasn't that entertaining, because if you weren't fully cognizant of all of the rules and the implications thereof, you couldn't enjoy it as a race.
I think this is going to become, as you say, that bit more complicated. And if you read through the rules, as I was saying, if you could use that power coming out of a bend, then it would give you quite an advantage. Under this system, theoretically, as I understand it, you can't actually use this until you're already picking up some pace, so about 75. So you're going to need to be cornering at some speed. And if you're in a traction zone, you also can't use it because it then gives you too much advantage over everyone else. So although you're getting some help through the handicap system, where you can use this help is quite limited. And I think if you are pacing around a circuit trying to figure out when you can and can't use your extra power, it is going to make things complicated. It's got potential to make things quite close. Is it going to make enough of a difference when you're doing 75 and up, unless you're at full throttle? I don't know. I just don't know. I don't know whether it is going to be as effective as it can be in other forms of motorsport. I think the cars are going to be quicker, but I don't know. I'm just really not sure.
I'm just hopeful that it becomes perhaps a bit less of a contact sport, because I think certainly over recent seasons, the whole touring car thing has become a little too aggressive, and I think that has spoiled the entertainment value of it. And I've been following touring cars since the late 80s, very early 90s, and it has become, I think, in the last 5-6 years, a little bit too aggressive. And I don't remember it being like that. Maybe it's my rose-tinted spectacles in reverse, but I don't remember it being quite so aggressive. The big wing Cozzies, the RS500, and the M3s, and the Merc 250/16. They were just great cars, and they didn't drive them intentionally into each other, I think. Maybe some did, but it was entertaining.
You think it's a bit cleaner, perhaps?
I think it was. I don't think there was quite the investment. I mean, there was a lot of money. If you were going to go play in the touring cars, you had to be spending a lot of money. But you didn't want to have to rebuild the car completely after every round, particularly as they're now doing 3 races per day. And, you've got to have the car survive that. You can't rebuild it every time.
I mean, they certainly had a bit of a coming together even on the press day, which raised a few eyebrows. There's been some fantastically tense moments, though. If you are, if you do go back to the Super Tourers, the stuff of the 90s, the stuff of the 80s as well, I think the moment that always sticks in my mind is the "I'm going for first," says Cleland, which is perhaps one of the finest moments of BTCC. What a brilliant bit of commentary as well. Absolutely hilarious.
A lovely man, John Cleland.
Yeah.
even if the first time you came to Goodwood, he did bin it straight away. But there you go. Very, very nice guy. First time I drove Volvo 850, he was my coach. That was at Silverstone on the Grand Prix circuit. And it had only just arrived. And it was a left-hand drive, and I'd spent all day in all of the other cars I'd driven that day getting apexes as just as tidy and nice as I could get them. And suddenly I'm in a left-hand drive Volvo, and I'm 6 foot away from every apex. It was very disheartening, but he was a smashing chap to spend some time with.
See, I quite enjoyed racing left-hand drive, or driving left-hand drive fast. Last time I was at Silverstone, I was taken around by a Le Mans driver, and he was my instructor, and I was in a left-hand drive Vantage, one of the new Vantages, and it was superb. I really was. I was expecting it to be harder being left-hand drive. I drive a fair amount of left-hand drive cars just through the nature of everyday work, so I've kind of got a bit more used to it. But you tend to find yourself punching the armrest on the door every so often when you go to change gear, and this didn't happen. And I don't know whether it's just because I was using the paddles, and so it doesn't matter if you're on one side or the other. But I found it really, really refreshing. I managed to get some pretty good pace on the other cars. And to be fair, I suspect it's probably because the instructor was that good. He was absolutely superb, and he was encouraging me to look through each corner and just basically go for it. As much speed as we could possibly get out of this thing, we had out of it.
I think I'm right in saying that the reason that racing cars for a very long time, when they were still two-seaters, they were right-hand drive for a very long time because you were closer to the apex on clockwise circuits, which were the predominant, and still are, the predominant nature of racing circuits. And that's why you sort of see a lot of cars from the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s even, when they were still two-seaters, are right-hand drive. And as you know, as we do come from a right-hand drive country, it's quite nice to see.
Yeah.
Even though you can have a little bit of pride in being on the wrong side from the rest of the world sometimes when you see things like that. Or am I mistaken?
I think you're right.
If you look at the earliest French racing cars, they were right-hand drivers as well, because briefly, before the First World War, France drove on the right.
Didn't know that. There you go. I think you're right about clockwise circuits. I'm just trying to think about any that I've driven on being the other way round. I'm sure they've all been clockwise.
I'm trying to do the same mental juggling, and I'm trying to think of the circuits I've driven on, and I think they've all been clockwise that I can recall.
Yeah. I wonder if there's a reason for that. Was it just that was the way that airfields generally ran? Because most of the circuits in this country, or a lot of the circuits in this country, of course, were perimeter roads of airfields, weren't they?
Yeah.
They've been developed from World War II and not a lot of them. Obviously, there's some that before. But if you think about the likes of Goodwood's an obvious example of this, isn't it? It is the perimeter road.
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder whether...
Ditto Thruxton, ditto Snetterton, not Alton Park. Where else can I think of? Donington I don't know well enough to comment. But Thruxton I've always liked as a circuit. Very quick.
Donington is clockwise.
With the exception that proves the rule, the first purpose-built racing circuit in the world, and I'm doing some PR for them again, hello Brooklands, is Brooklands, because obviously that goes very much anti-clockwise, as anyone
not so much anymore.
Well, bits of it. Most of it still goes. The bit that you can still go on, you can go anti-clockwise on.
Yes.
And I know I've been there an awful lot. But yeah, anyone who's seen that famous photo of John Cobb in the Railton taking off over a bump on the banking will know that they are going anti-clockwise.
Yeah. I know we've said it many, many times before, but my God, balls of steel, I think, to be driving around Brooklands. It is so steep. Millbrook is the wrong way round, I suppose.
Oh yeah, it is, isn't it?
It is. Yeah, quite so. Yeah.
What about Nardo? Is Nardo the wrong way round?
No, I think Nardo is clockwise. I think. I'm just trying to recall the bits of film that I've seen of people testing stuff at very high speed there.
I just remember the XJ220 and the McLaren there. Where they de-restricted the XJ220 so it would do the 220, if I remember. It's a bit of PR at work there. Yes, sorry we put a V6 in the back. It was meant to be a V12, but look how quick it goes.
I'm not too fussed by the power plant. I think if it's got potential to go that quick, and I think this is the thing about electric now. It has you could put an electric motor in something and it goes incredibly quick. We're fortunate enough that we have an incredible back catalogue of beautiful sounding V8s, V10s, V12s and V6s or what have you. And if you want to have something just for the pure noise, then you can just have a flick through the catalogue, look at Italy, point at pretty much anything that's got a prancing horse on it or, a dancing bull or whatever you like.
Or a Trident.
Yeah, or a Trident.
I have to get a word in for Maserati there.
Yeah, there are some beautiful sounding cars out there, aren't there? And definitely Mazdas are up there. So why not? If you want to do that, that's fine. If your pure sole purpose is going quickly, then I can see where electric's going to come in.
I may have told this story before, but I used to live in a Hampshire village which was in a valley with a very steep, windy hill down to it. A blast through the village and a right turn across a bridge and then a long straight road that led out towards Winchester. And I don't know who the guy was, but there was a 60s Maserati 3500 GT. And you used to hear him from miles away, down through the gears, through the village, and up through the gears as he sped off towards it. It was an oral delight. I would stand in the garden and just listen to this on a Sunday as he came through the village. And, he wasn't going particularly fast. It was just the delightful sound of that engine.
Mm-hmm. I'm just going to wind back. We were saying, obviously, right-hand drive and racing. There's a lot of left-hand drive rally cars. And I'm just trying to figure out what the difference is here. There must be a reason for this.
Probably because the majority of the cars that they're based on are designed to be left-hand drive first, so the cars are optimised for that setup. So everything, I mean, famously, there's cars that have been road cars that have been made left-hand drive first and then adapted for right-hand drive. I mean, the Golf, I think, was one of them where it didn't work so well. There was a reason we couldn't have the G60 in right-hand drive because bits of the engine were in the wrong place for the steering column, that sort of thing. I'm sure they're better at it now, but I'm sure it's a historical thing. And the majority of your rally drivers are probably more used to left-hand drive. Not that they couldn't drive equally as well in right-hand drive, but it gives the majority the advantage, I suspect.
I didn't know if it was it gives you an easier, because if you're right-handed, maybe it's easier to get the gear shifts and switches and bits and pieces. I just wondered if there was a reason for it. And the honest answer is I don't know. There maybe there is a reason. I'll have a look, go away after this, and if I can find a reason, I shall let you know. I mean, partly, as you say, maybe in rally there are a lot of natural left-hand drivers. So you've got the Swedish, the Finnish, all fantastic drivers on slippery surfaces, a left-hand drive. As you say, lots of cars, particularly stuff, if you've ever worked on anything from the 80s and early 90s particularly, brakes, for example, are often actuated by a rod that goes across from one side to the other. They don't shift that round. Some cars, as you say, are set up to be best optimised for power the other way. The imported, the V8 Mustangs, the GTs in this country have less horsepower because the way that the manifolds run, because of things being in the way, being in right-hand drive as opposed to left-hand drive. So it does add a complication. It generally speaking isn't as reliable, so there's that, and maybe isn't as powerful. I don't know.
I'm guessing also that with rally cars, you want to be as close to the original as possible, to the minimum modifications. So swapping the steering, I think, would involve so much re-engineering of the front of the car that it just possibly isn't worth doing. I just
honestly don't know. If you know, write to us, tell us, or tweet us, or whatever you want to do to us. You can find us on Telegram, actually. We are at UK Motor Talk pretty much everywhere that you care to mention. We're available in most good newsagents and other stockists.
And not even on the top shelf.
Well, sometimes. We are keen on an Escort and a Fiesta.
Whilst we're sort of sticking with the new motoring theme, electricity being the way forward, Mercedes seem to have planted their flag in the electric world, and news reaches us of the new Vision EQXX, which has demonstrated its world-beating efficiency and has done 1,000 kilometres on one battery charge, which is about 600 and something miles, I think. It's
620 odd, something like that.
It's not far off, and that's pretty good. That's sort of good diesel distance, isn't it, really? And that's an average consumption, though this means absolutely nothing to me, even though I do have various qualifications in electrical stuff. An average consumption of 8.7 kilowatts per 100 kilometres. So anyone with a calculator that can convert that into real world, that sounds good, but I'm sure others who are better qualified can tell me.
That is quite impressive and quite a breakthrough, I think. They're really pushing the envelope, I think, in terms of duration. That makes a quick GT-like dash across Europe eminently possible, which it hasn't been.
Well, that's pretty good. Apparently, it travelled from Sindelfingen, which is in Germany, across the Swiss Alps and northern Italy to Cassis on the Côte d'Azur, and that's in everyday traffic, apparently, on a single charge. And it still had 140 kilometres remaining, which basically says it had 15% of its battery still in use. So whilst range anxiety was probably starting to be something in the minds of those piloting it, I think that sounds like the sort of thing I could live with. And it was used in real world as well. It included autobahn runs, slow, stop-start, even rain and horrible weather. So they had the wipers and the heaters and the lights on and all sorts. So hats off to Mercedes. That's pretty impressive.
In the real world, if you're using it as an actual car, what was this doing? Kilowatt hours?
8.7.
Yes, I mean, real world, that's exceptional. I mean, it's really economical. It's kind of like the equivalent of picking up your 45 miles to the gallon car and then jumping into something that will obviously do 60, 70 miles to the gallon. I'm not sure how that maths equates in truth, but it is impressive. It is impressive. I guess is the point I'm trying to make.
You could commute for a month on a charge, the distances that you sort of travel. And David, it would suit you very well because you're unfortunately thrown back into commuting.
It would be nice. I mean, I did the first time I went back into town. I did take my own car, being a sort of nice. It's slush. Well, it's not a Slushmatic. It's actually a very good DSG, and I thought I'd take that. And it was lovely, just point and go and stop-start traffic. But in the real world, I'm getting twice or half the consumption, depending on which way you look at it, using a 1 litre EcoBoost Fiesta. And whilst I have to change my own gears, it's no great hardship, to be honest, compared to how much I was shelling out to fill the tank of the Skoda.
It is getting very expensive to run a car on petrol. And I expect, I know we've spoken about it before, but I expect you guys are all finding the same on the newer E10 stuff. The economy just isn't as good. I was getting, and it's not great news, to be honest, for the Mini, which will do somewhere between sort of 22 and, if you're very careful, 29 mpg. I was getting to a full tank around about 225 miles, maybe 250 miles. And I guess if you're really careful, you can get sort of maybe 350 on the super stuff if you were really granting it about. It's now down to about 185. The two, because most of my journeys are warming up for a minute, drive it to work, and it's a 5 mile journey, and then sort of switch it off. So it doesn't have much economical driving. But 185 miles to a tank, that's painful, really, considering the prices now. And it does seem to be that it's this new fuel. So with each tank goes in an octane booster, and that helps it a bit, but it's definitely not the same.
We were talking fairly recently about the best places to buy petrol. And in the small town near me, it's a garage I very, very rarely use. But I was low on fuel. I needed to pop in and get a little bit to get me to the next supermarket forecourt, which I was actually aiming for. And I looked at the pumps. This very tiny forecourt, only 2 pumps. And I thought, there's no E10. So I put E5 in at a ridiculous cost. I think it was $1.77, I think it was, a litre. And I said to the guy inside, who I happen to know owns this place, what about, where's the no E10 on the forecourt? I'm not having that stuff on my forecourt. It ruins cars. You know, and he gave me chapter and verse on it. And it was like hearing, you know, he'd got a very country accent anyway, but it was like, I'm not going up in one of them newfangled hairy planes. No, you know, it was quite comic, really, the fact that this guy, for whatever reason, we know there are limitations for certain vehicles with E10 fuels.
You fuel the carb, basically.
As far as he was concerned, E10 was the devil's brew, and you wouldn't even run your Zippo lighter on it.
My car, I will only ever put super in, and I have paid pretty much what you've just quoted there.
We dare not even say the number. We've got to that point now in hushed tones. We talk about, oh God, I've just had to forgive me, Father, for I I've E5'd.
If you want to see a grown man cry on Zoom, then I will mention it. No, it's painful. This is the reason I'm not driving this thing into West London. It's now back to doing what it was meant to do, high days and holidays, and it's fantastic at that. The noise it makes and the accelerator, it's just brilliant. I love it, but it's not a commuting car, no matter. You'd have to be an Assis or someone if you were going to try and do that. But we do put E10 in the Fiesta, and whilst I am still getting far more favourable figures on the instant readout and the average readout, it's definitely lower than I recall, and we are getting less out of a tank. But we are balanced off that because the stop-start wasn't working for a long time. We had a new battery put in and we tried everything. And then I found the secret combination of button pushes and pedal pushes and all that on the internet. And lo and behold, it's cutting out in traffic again when I want it to, obviously. And I think that's probably helping considerably. It's so nice. I never thought I'd ever want that feature working properly, but it does seem to work very well in that car. And so it's probably helping a little bit.
It's pretty cool. I mean, those little EcoBoost engines are super economical, and they are quite perky. You get the turbo cuts in about 1,500.
Yeah, the
but I did an economical drag race in one against my best mate in he had a VW Fox, or rather his wife did, and we drove back across the coast from Brighton, and I managed 64 point something, 64.6 I think it was, and then 72.9. So how is that even possible to get that out of a petrol engine? I mean, that was properly, coasting everywhere I could possibly coast, being as gentle as I possibly could with the throttle, maximum anticipation, no braking, all the rest of it. But the fact that's possible, and then when I had a 215 horsepower, the 4-cylinder, and not the same engine, but 1.6 turbo in a Fiesta ST, that was doing 42 and a bit if you weren't being careful, and if you were being sensible about it, mixed driving, it was getting 47. It's mad as the performance you can get out of a modern engine. I think we've reached that point now where we've peaked, and we've hit these like we have diesel particulate filters, which are ruining diesels. The way that they drive these days, they're just nowhere near as torquey as they used to be. They don't seem as powerful. And if you've driven one with a DPF and one without, you'll know exactly what I mean. But cars have got these petrol particulate or gasoline particulate filters, and that seems to have done a similar sort of thing. It's stifled them, which means you don't get quite so much power, which means you try a bit harder, which means you don't get quite so much economy. I think we've reached a point where we've peaked. We've gone over the top, and I wonder whether manufacturers have given up investing in any kind of petrol engine, because what's the point? We've done as good as I think we're going to get, and now we've got cars like this Mercedes, which is a great looking thing. I mean, if you think it's designed to be super slippery, it's got a drag coefficient of 0.17 or something silly, which is not a lot. There's not a lot of drag going on there, but it doesn't look ugly like a Prius does. Sorry if you drive a Prius and you think it's the most beautiful thing. You're wrong. It's not.
No, it's not a looker.
No,
not a pretty car.
Not a pretty car. But this is, and I think it's the kind of car that you could own and be proud of, not just because of its eco credentials, but because it's a nice car. And it has doors and it has seats, and you can sit in it, and you can presumably drop your kids to school in it or whatever. It kind of makes sense as a car.
Really low drag cars. I always fancied one of those. I think Honda made it. Sun Racer. That was almost entirely a photovoltaic cell, which they sort of toured across Australia. And I mean, it was hugely impractical, but a fascinating vehicle nevertheless. It was like an electric tortoise, or it had sort of scales, photovoltaic scales. It was a really impressive looking vehicle.
More an armadillo.
Yeah, like more accurately.
A wheeled armadillo. I know exactly the one you mean. Yeah, it was a wonderful thing, wasn't it? I'm sure I've seen it in a museum somewhere. Perhaps it was Bewley or somewhere where they had it on loan. But I was just looking at the EQXX or EQXX, take your pick. The back of it looks a little bit like the most recent Volvo S80. The one with sort of funny lights at the back that sort of come outwards and down. It's a bit like that. It's not unpleasant looking, actually. It's purposeful.
I thought you were going to say the Kia EV6, because that's
that
what
as well. Yes,
yeah, that's what I saw. Like, the rear haunches on this thing are quite nice, though. It does have quite a sculpted shape. It has a traditionally coupe-like shape, with that sort of, especially the way that the windows are. They sort of teardrop down to the back. Yeah, I think it's a really nice looking car.
The front, though, having said that, the front does look a little bit like that weird Mitsuoka thing. Look it up, everyone. OROCHI. It's got a face only a mother could love, and it's like a slightly gormless looking fish with a smile on it. It's the thing. If you remember, there was an episode of Top Gear where they had to drive around Japan dropping off sumo wrestlers. James May drove one. You'll know the thing. It just got slight hints of that. But that being said, it's a fantastic looking car, and if that's the future of electric cars, then so be it. Sign me up. I'll have one. If it can do that many miles.
For me, there's a bit of the VW IDR, if you remember the hill climb car off of Goodwood.
Yes.
Yes.
I'm just something you said earlier, Graham. You mentioned about the solar panels on the roof, and I berated the Prius, but there was one thing that I really quite liked about it, and even cars I don't like, I usually find one thing that I do, and that is that even going back a few years now, Toyota fitted solar panels to the roof, and you can choose, I think, whether you want to have a full sunroof or some solar panels and the sunroof or whatever that's on the top. What it does is it uses that power just to run the climate control, so that the internal temperature side of the car stays where you want it to be. So in the summer, when you come back to it, it's nice and cold. It's not boiling hot inside, and that's pretty clever. There are some really clever things going on in the EV world, and certainly we've just leapfrogged. In the last few years, we just seem to have absolutely jumped forward in terms of what's accessible, what's possible in terms of EV. And Dave, you're going to see a bit more about this, aren't you?
Yes, I'm very much looking forward to the Fully Charged live show, which is taking place at the Farnborough International Airport, or Farnborough Aerodrome as we used to know it, or the Royal Aircraft Establishment. Take your pick. It's happening there on April the 29th, 30th and the 1st of May. Yes, I'll be going along. It looks like there should be some quite interesting stuff there. If nothing else, I get to see the ID Buzz in the flesh, which will be...
a bit jealous.
Well, those who've been listening for a little while will know that we're all quite keen on that. So I'll be reporting back and hopefully talking to a few of the movers and shakers in the electric car world.
See, I was just thinking, movers and shakers in an electrical context implies something different. Press release came our way today, which was fascinating, if for no other reason, and we do have to put the photos up for this, because you won't believe what they've done to a Mini until you actually see the photos.
Poor thing.
The press release is essentially for the 50th running of the Nürburgring 24 hours. A local team, relatively local team, has entered a very, very special John Cooper Works Mini. And in advance, as a spoiler alert, on the photos, it's got the yes,
spoiler alert.
Yes, unintended pun there, but it has the largest rear spoiler I think I've ever seen on anything other than perhaps a Porsche Langheck Le Mans car.
It's like a Lightning.
I mean, it's quite ridiculous.
Calling international rescue. Well,
you know, to overcome the wheelie effect of the rear spoiler, I think they're going to need an enormous front splitter on it, which will mean that they'll never run into the back of anything, because the front splitter will have to be at least 6 foot long. But it's really stripped out and it's really rebuilt as a racer. Whether one would last 24 hours of the Nürburgring, I don't know. I don't know who's going to be driving it as yet as well. But it sort of led me into a train of thought. I saw the John Cooper Works, which is a slightly sore point of mine, because I saw recently one of those overinflated big minis with John Cooper Works plastered all over it. It was a Countryman. It was extremely ugly, and just John Cooper would have literally turned in his grave. He never saw the new Mini because he was too ill in bed. It was not long before he died. I think he would have been okay with the new Mini, but not the overinflated version. And I think it's just unfortunate using the John Cooper Works epithet in respect of any of them.
Well, John Cooper was instrumental in the development of the early new Minis, the R53 and the R50. The R53, because he accidentally blurted out what the R53, this is the supercharged Mini, which is the one that I have, what it was going to be, because at the time it was entirely secret. It was about late 2001, early 2002, and he was talking about how having to shoehorn the supercharger in there. Everyone's like, "What?" So, hang on a second, John. Would you mind saying that again?
Because he's gone again.
Hang on. He's literally just down the road from me. The John Cooper garage is round the corner. Yeah. He and Mike Cooper, of course, they would have trucks near enough blocking the railway, because it's literally just south of a really busy railway crossing, just the other side of it. And they would have trucks and trucks and trucks of bits coming in and going out to BMW as they're working on the kits to convert cars over. And not just the supercharged ones, the early minis, early new minis, should I say, as well. And those, John Cooper, before Mini bought the name wholesale, and were allegedly paying so much per badge, per car, to use the name. Yeah, they did a huge bit of work, John Cooper garages. But like I say, the new big stuff, I'm not sure that really would have been his bag. The Mini Beasts are
no, absolutely not
huge.
Michael was explaining that, as you've already alluded to, BMW suddenly realised the Mini was much more successful than they anticipated.
Michael Cooper,
John's son, and they were paying so much money for the name that in the end they made him an offer he couldn't refuse for the company. Sadly, Dad had gone by then, but this is John Cooper was a fascinating man. I met him a number of times, and he was the man that first spotted with Minis. He was a friend of Alekis Igonis. He was driving the Mini before it was available to anybody. in sort of late 58, I think early 59. And he was the first man to see the potential of it for motorsports, and what a successful motor car it's been through all its iterations. So we do wish them well. And I'd say another triggering thought was, I happened to be parked in the airport in Gatwick yesterday, and there was a beautiful 65, 66 fully restored Cooper S.
Oh, now you're chatting.
Great fun. Great fun.
Twin fuel fillers and all, I expect. That's how you used to be able to tell them apart, wasn't it? Lovely things. I always thought they're missing a trick. I know the name is possibly slightly tainted. Well, certainly in Britain, which is where they sold probably about 99% of them. But why don't they just call the big Mini the Maxi and just be done with it?
Yeah.
Yes, indeed.
I'm not sure that the people they're targeting the Mini at would remember what the Maxi is. And I know that they trade on the nostalgia of everything. But I think the Maxi, as you call it, I don't really understand why they make a 5-door standard size Mini, which is even more stretched and slightly gobbling than
ridiculous looking.
I mean, thankfully, the new Mini, when it comes out, is going to be resized, so it's going to be a bit closer to the original new Minis, which are, to my mind, the right sort of proportions.
They're the perfect proportions, as far as
the first one. First one's the best.
They weren't always the easiest of drives, but they're great fun to drive. It's like a high-powered skateboard. I think John Cooper's only mistake he made, and he did say that there was a mistake that nearly killed him, was when he tried to produce a twin-engine one.
The Twinny.
The Twinny, yes.
The Twinny Mini, and it was. I don't think it was ever intended as anything other than an interesting project. But it was a very, very dangerous, very contrary. It was like a bucking bronco. And as I say, John Cooper said the thing nearly killed him. He gave up on the process. It just wasn't safe to be around. Great character. I mean, this is a man who I think would be... his party piece when his cars won a Grand Prix would be to do a somersault in the pit lane. But now he'd be horizontally rotating in his grave. Some of the things that his name has been attached to.
Well, still, I mean, if nothing else, he can be proud of the fact that this is a brand that's known around the world and that so many people love, enjoy, and there are clubs that are dedicated to cars that do have his name on it. And I guess people have that ideal image of what is a fast, sporty, well-made, well-handling little car, I guess. There are people out there that love what he's done for the world, and he's had an impact and left a legacy. So what more can you ask for? And on that note, I guess it's probably time to end. So guys, it's been a pleasure chatting with you again. Join us next time when we will be testing a number of new and exciting vehicles. More about that soon. So from me, Mike, it's goodbye.
From me, Graham, good night, folks. Take care.
And from me, Dave, take care. See you next time.
Bye-bye.
UK Motor Talk, a First Take Media production.